Dr. Samuel, who owned a large farm east of Dallas that spread for several miles.
Dr. Samuel, a prominent physician in Dallas in the late 1800s who valued sport and healthy lifestyles, died in the late 1930s and bequeathed a very large piece of property to the city to forever be used as a public park.
It took some time for the estate to get settled, but the city started developing the park early on, and development plans were slowed during the World War II years, and then the city returned to it afterwards.
By the early 50s, especially after the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision requiring integration of public schools, the man in charge of Dallas Parks and Recreation wanted to be a leader for change.
L.B. Houston, who was the superintendent of the city parks, he saw the writing on the wall that Dallas was going to integrate, and he planned to integrate the city parks, which had been segregated going back to the early 20th century.
Since Samuel Grand Park was bordered by black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods, Houston believed integration would work there first.
And as South Dallas became more and more a black neighborhood, and to the north, East Dallas and the Lakewood neighborhoods were white neighborhoods, that park, Samuel Grand Park, could be a place where the citizens might work things out on their own.
Along with integrating parks, L.B. Houston's plan also included spending lots of money to upgrade city parks, with the goal of turning them into modern and desirable facilities for all the people moving into Dallas.
So he targeted Samuel Grand as the showpiece for Dallas Parks and Recreation.
The city of Dallas, as large a city as it was in this time frame, as late as the 60s, did not have a municipal tennis center.
We needed a tennis center, and that was it. And Jack Turpin was the leader of making it happen.
Mr. Turpin had a particular vision in mind. He really believed in public tennis because he had grown up on public tennis courts, had learned to play on public tennis courts, and had been a very successful player.
Jack Turpin grew up in Oak Cliff, graduated from Rice University, and in the late 50s was living, working, and playing tennis in Dallas.
The Dallas Tennis Association had sort of gone defunct. And somebody asked if I would be willing to be president of it.
Turpin's passion for tennis ensured he would say yes, and he was elected president of the Dallas Tennis Association, which, at the time, only had 4 members.
So I set some goals for the Tennis Association. And among the top 5 was the promotion of the concept of municipal tennis center.
And I think between Mr. Turpin's vision of top public tennis facilities and L.B. Houston's vision of a top public park, the two of them it was a perfect match.
As the new president of the Dallas Tennis Association, Turpin began talking with Houston about the need for a tennis center in Dallas, and in December of 1961, after news leaked in a newspaper article, Turpin made the announcement about the city's approval to build the Dallas Tennis Center at Samuel Grand Park in a letter to DTA members, calling it the most significant advancement in Dallas tennis in many, many years.
The plan for the Samuel Grand Park was not only would it be a public park, but it would be a facility that would attract national or international tournaments, which could be used to advertise tennis in Dallas, not just to the rest of the world, but to potential tennis players in Dallas.
Houston turned the design over to Turpin, giving him permission to create the tennis center exactly the way he wanted. As described in Turpin's letter, there would be 12 hard surface courts of championship caliber, a pro shop, shower and locker rooms for men and women, an indoor tennis court, and seating to enable Dallas to hold the finest competitive events.
We built 2 courts at a time. We had the beautiful landscaping around Samuel Grand, around the park, so that they were at different elevations. And it turned out that, it was a beautiful park. LB was thrilled to death.
The Dallas Tennis Center, now known as Samuel Grand Tennis Center, cost $420,000 to build and opened its doors in 1963.
Those were as fine a tennis courts at that time had ever been built in Dallas.
Just in time to host the Texas Sectional Championships, a 5-state tournament awarded to Dallas by the Texas Tennis Association back in December 1961, before the facility had even been built.
The story of the park was told in tennis magazines. The park, the city won awards for it. Other cities, Kansas City, maybe Minneapolis. There were other cities that came to Dallas or wrote Mr. Houston and said, how did you build this place? How did you get it funded? How did you convince the voters and the city hall to do this? Because we want to do it too. We've heard about what a great facility this is. And that was good advertising for Dallas.
Jack Turpin never made it secret that he had big plans for the city's new and only tennis center. While the facility was still under construction, Turpin was quoted in several different newspaper articles saying one day he hoped to have the Davis Cup played at Samuel Grand Tennis Center. In 1965, Mr. Turpin's dream had the chance to become reality.
In 1965, there's an opportunity to get the Davis Cup tie between the United States and Mexico here. And that's really the good luck for the United States team, not such good luck for the Mexican team.
One day, spring of '65, Mr. Turpin got a call from an old friend, Bob Malika, who was an official with the United States Lawn Tennis Association and very aware of the high-quality courts at Samuel Grand.
He said, Jack, here's what we got. He said, the United States is getting ready to play Mexico this year in the Davis Cup on clay in Mexico, and we probably are going to lose because they have Osuna, who was probably the best clay court player in the world at the time, and a fellow named Palafons, and they were good. And we're going to lose. Mexico, however, is broke, and they don't have the financial wherewithal to really do anything. So I said, well, Bob, what you're saying that we can buy it?
Turpin jumped at the opportunity, started negotiating with Mexico, and secured the Davis Cup tie between the United States and Mexico for $20,000, and it would be played at Samuel Grand Tennis Center.
And it all happened pretty quickly. That was all worked out in the spring of 1965, and they had to get working on it right away. But the facility was here in terms of the courts. But getting the seating arranged for spectators and figuring out all sorts of things like how to pay for it, how to sell tickets, what to do with food concessions, all of that was organized very quickly. But so many people in Dallas were on board right away that they volunteered their services.
I had no idea that the city would respond the way it did.
It was for us, it was a big time event. And I was very involved with the junior league.
Turpin enlisted the help of the women in the junior league, like Nancy Jeffett, who's left her own indelible mark on tennis, because he says he knew they were the ones who got things done.
We were very cognizant that this is a big thing for Dallas.
I think the fact that we as a community had been led to build a facility that could handle it. I was very proud that Dallas was going to host the first Davis Cup match in Texas on a public park. I mean, that's big time.
(1965), the year the Davis Cup is set to be played at Samuel Grand Tennis Center, is a year rifled with change and turbulence. The United States is entrenched in Vietnam. Here at home, the civil rights movement is coming to a head. President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and the movement spawned a very powerful demonstration in Selma, Alabama. The result was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In Dallas, like many major cities across the South, African Americans register to vote by the thousands for the first time.
I've seen the photographs of the lineups at the voter registration offices in Dallas, and that's in the spring of 1965. Dallas schools are still primarily segregated. This is more than 10 years after the Brown decision, but like in so many metropolitan areas and rural areas across the South, it took a long time for the schools to comply with the integration orders. That's still happening in Dallas. Dallas itself is still recovering from the Kennedy assassination of 2 years earlier. Around the country, Dallas is known as the city of hate.
6 days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles.
The proverbial pot boils over not just in Dallas, but across the South and all over the nation.
Major riots break out in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, demonstrating that the so-called race problem is not just a Southern problem, it's a nationwide problem. So that's the context. And then, summer of 1965, this integrated African American and white tennis team, Davis Cup team, comes to Dallas.
Jack Turpin recognized the political and social climate across the country as well as in Dallas, and didn't want the so-called hate to overshadow one of the world's greatest ever sporting events.
Jack Turpin made a point of speaking with the mayor, important members on the city council, in particular with the sports reporters in the leading dailies. Dallas had 2 daily newspapers at the time, to request that they treat the event as a sporting event, not as an event, an integration event. And so, interview people about tennis. Don't write stories about what do you think about having an integrated tennis team playing in Dallas. Nobody knew for sure in the days leading up to the event, even whether it would, whether Dallas would behave, is the way I know some people have put it. It's interesting. After the event, Arthur Ashe gave an interview to a journalist who wrote one of the first books on Arthur Ashe, and Ashe said that he always suspected, at the time when he was here playing, that the event was being held at a public facility because he was playing. Now, we know that's not true because the Dallas Tennis Association, and Jack Turpin in particular, wanted a major event at this public facility. And had there been no Arthur Ashe on the Davis Cup team, had the players all been white, it would have been played at Samuel Grand, the public facility, anyway. But at the same time, there was no chance that Arthur Ashe was going to get to play on the Davis Cup team in a private facility. This was the first major event that Ashe played in south of Richmond, Virginia, because all of the major events were played in private facilities. And so it worked out. It wasn't because of Arthur Ashe that Samuel Grand was the location for this event, but in a sense, it had to be at Samuel Grant.
Once the United States Lawn Tennis Association and the Mexican Tennis Federation approved the Davis Cup deal, Jack Turpin and his group got down to work. Crews transformed courts 1 and 2 into a stadium court.
We built the stadium, priced the seats, and within a 3-week period, we were sold out.
We found out about the Davis Cup by reading the morning news, and they said it was coming to Dallas. And everybody was so happy over it, you know. And they were saying, well, how can we go and everything like that.
Marcus Freeman, an avid tennis player and high school tennis coach at the time, wasn't going to miss the opportunity to watch some of the best players in the world compete right in his backyard. And it was a star-studded affair. The Americans boasted U.S. #1 Dennis Ralston, Ham Richardson, the up-and-coming Arthur Ashe, and Marty Reeson. No shortage of firepower for Mexico. World #4 Rafael Osuna and Antonio Palafox led their 5-man team. The Americans and the Mexicans arrived in Dallas a full week before the matches were to begin on July 30th. To kick off the Davis Cup festivities, American coach Pancho Gonzalez, Ralston, and Ashe held a free clinic for kids. Newspapers reported more than 500 children participated on July 25th. After that, it was down to business. Both teams held daily practice sessions, and the public could watch their workouts.
The practices were open. It didn't cost anything. And you can see the pictures of, these people lying back on the grass, relaxing, black and white, watching the tennis. And in 1965, in Dallas, this was almost unheard of. This was brand new.
I saw Osuna practice, and that's unbelievable.
We pretty much were about business to get ready. It was bloody hot, and so we had to prepare so that we could withstand the heat. We had to train really hard, and we were focused on the mission, and that was to beat Mexico.
During one of those practices, Freeman recalls what happened when Ashe apparently didn't follow the coach's direction.
Gonzalez fed him a low ball, and Art stood straight up. He didn't bend his knee. So Gonzalez said, okay, hit the track. He made him run a 1 mile around the whole facility. I never shall forget that.
Also not to be forgotten, this would be the first Davis Cup ever played at a public facility since the competition first began in 1900, a fact particularly special to Dennis Ralston.
I grew up at a public park, so that's where I started to play. So I thought it was pretty neat that we were playing at a public facility, and I figured they'd get good crowds because Dallas is always, drawn for tennis events, and so it wasn't really like, in fact, I kind of preferred that rather than to the posh country club and that some of those places, some of the places we played. So it was exciting to play. I mean, anytime you're asked to represent the United States, you can't ask for more than that as a tennis player. It's just like, wow, this is what you always wanted to do as a kid, even bigger than playing Wimbledon, even bigger than, the biggest honor you could have is to be asked to represent your country, and that's how I felt, and I still feel that way.
According to Ralston, the 1965 Davis Cup weighed a bit heavier on his teammate and friend, Arthur Ashe.
I know for Arthur, it was a very interesting moment in his life as far as it was his first big Davis Cup match, where it really was important and counted. Not that the other ones he played didn't really, but this is where he was on stage, so he knew everybody would be watching him.
Well, it was pretty exciting to have Arthur Ashe there to play.
Nancy Jeffett, inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame just last month, was just one of thousands who flocked to Samuel Grant, hoping to witness an upset since Mexico was favored to win. When the action started, Ralston came out swinging first against Antonio Palafox. It wasn't a tough match for Ralston, winning in 3 straight sets 6-2, 6-3, 6-2. Next up, Ashe against Mexico's top player Rafael Osuna. Ashe didn't disappoint. However, many were surprised, including Marcus Freeman.
I didn't think you know, Ash could do it because Osuna, like I said, he had the ranking.
Apparently, that ranking meant little to Ash. He walked away with the match 6-2, 6-3, 9-7, and the United States led 2-0. The next day brought doubles action. Ham Richardson and Dennis Ralston against Osuna and Palafox. Now, a couple interesting facts here. Osuna and Ralston had been college roommates at USC. It gets better. In 1960, the two of them won the Gentlemen's Doubles Championship at Wimbledon. Ralston was only 17 years old at the time and missed his high school graduation to play at the All England Club. Finally, Ralston was out for revenge after losing to Osuna during a previous Davis Cup match.
So that was a goal. Every time I stepped on the court against Rafael, I was out to win no matter what.
Unfortunately, Ralston would not reach his goal, even though he and Ham Richardson were favored to win.
I never thought they'd win the doubles. I never thought they could beat Ralston and Richardson. Ham was as good a doubles player as there was at the time, and Dennis was fantastic. I never thought they'd lose.
Well, losing the doubles was not exactly a fun memory when I lost the doubles here, because that put a lot of pressure on the next match for Arthur.
Mexico's doubles win put them back in the fight, and now this Davis Cup showdown was turning into a real dream for Jack Turpin.
From the running it standpoint, it was fantastic. And we could have sold twice the tickets then for the final day, if we didn't have seats.
A sold-out crowd of 3,500 came to watch the third day action. This aerial photograph shows cars lining all the roads around the tennis center while folks filled the box seats at the back of the court and the stands. Marcus Freeman was right there in the middle of it all.
The finals was the exciting time. And when I went in and the guy on the gate was one of my good buddies, so he gave me a good seat, and he said, well, your ticket says you do this, but you can sit right here. So I had a good seat, and it seemed like things just went by so fast.
And that's probably exactly how Antonio Palafox must have felt when he faced Arthur Ashe for the first match of the day. It took Ashe only an hour and 15 minutes to wipe the court with Palafox. The youngest and least experienced member of the American team became the hero.
It was a great win for the U.S. and for our team.
After the Davis Cup event was over and the United States had won, the players who, some of the players who knew Dallas pretty well said, we need to go out and celebrate, and I know the place to go. We'll go to this popular drinking and dancing place called the Levee. And Arthur Ashe had heard of it, but he had never been, and he suggested that maybe that wasn't the best place for him to go. And the other players said, sure, come along, there won't be a problem. And now the Levee was this popular place on Mockingbird, not too far from SMU, and it was a long room and with the stage at the far end of it where the band played. And behind the stage was a gigantic rebel flag. So here's Arthur Ashe, who's like 21 years old at the time, 21, 22. And he walks into this room filled with white folks. And there's this giant rebel flag at the far end. And all of a sudden the band stops and it's quiet. And then the MC says, well, look who just walked in. It's Arthur Ashe and the Davis Cup team that just won this weekend's match over the Mexican team. And everyone cheered, and everyone wanted to meet the players, and everyone wanted to congratulate Arthur Ashe, and they just had a great time. So the Davis Cup event was in the summer of 1965, and the Dallas Invitational Tournament at Dallas Country Club was scheduled for the spring of 1966. And it's the spring event that was moved to Samuel Grand in 1966 because Dallas Country Club didn't want African American spectators there watching Arthur Ashe. Over the years, the two events were conflated in the memories of many people. So they remembered the Davis Cup event of 1965 as being held because Dallas Country Club refused to allow Arthur Ashe to play. That's a mistake. It was the Dallas Tennis Association, and Jack Turpin in particular, had been after a major tournament. They wanted to host a major tournament at Samuel Grand, and the Davis Cup event gave them an opportunity. It was never planned for Dallas Country Club.
I didn't realize the significance of it at the time. I really didn't, and that's probably good. To me, it was just something that could be done. Let's do it.
Jack Turpin's can-do attitude and his determination to always do the right thing may very well have played a pivotal role in how the Davis Cup played out, not on the court, but in the bleachers, on the courtside grassy venues, in the newspapers, on the news, in the celebrations. Conversations and stories stayed focused on tennis.
Samuel Grand was purposely placed at the nexus of a variety of communities, and it's still like that today.
Dewey Evans appreciates the history of the tennis center he now operates.
So it was a place where people were going to go in and sit next to potentially somebody who didn't look like them, didn't work in places like them, didn't go to school with them. And it was a chance for Dallas to come back to the forefront as a place which was somewhat progressive as opposed to being regressive. Dallas very much could have closed its doors and been defensive because of everything that happened, but it didn't. And it was important that at that point in time that it didn't. You know, for much of the reasons that sport is so important. You know, we look at all of the great movies about sports, and sports is about overcoming all of the other things in society which seem like they're so hard to get past. But for some reason, when you put people in a sports environment, all of that seems to melt away. And the Davis Cup tie at Samuel Grand in 1965 was just one of those occasions where it was about the sport. It wasn't about anything else. And people came and enjoyed it.
There was plenty of ugliness to go around, but this particular event, there was none. It was a shining moment, really, for Dallas in 1965. It was planned to showcase tennis, to showcase Samuel Grand Tennis Facility, to showcase the success of Dallas Parks and Recreation at integrating its parks. And then it turns out Arthur Ashe is on the team, and so there's this integrated tennis team, and Dallas behaved wonderfully, and there was absolutely nothing ugly about it. So, and that's really something that people should remember, because you know, in the midst of all sorts of ugly moments in history, there are often these shining moments when people really show that you know, or when people are really at their best, and they show how good things can be. This was one of those moments, and it should be remembered as such.
I wanted to put tennis rackets into the hands of children that probably would not have a chance to ever have a tennis racket. So my goal was to try to eventually get a place where children we would furnish them rackets, had a facility and instruction.
Jack Turpin, some 50 years later, talks about one of the goals he set for Samuel Grand Tennis Center back in the early 60s.
Through our own Unfurrowed Ground Foundation, a 501c3 public charity, we provided free instruction to more than 300 kids on Saturday evenings in our Achieve, Compete, and Excel, or ACE, program.
Dewey Evans in 2010 talks about his goals at the grand opening ceremonies for the new Pro Shop.
We envision through our Unfurrowed Ground Foundation that 30 to 40% of all of our instructional programming will be attended by children eligible for free or reduced lunch.
It was less than a year ago when Dewey Evans and Jack Turpin met for the first time, but their mission, their vision for Samuel Grand Tennis Center feels as if it's been intertwined for decades. Both men learned to play tennis in public parks. Both men know the powerful and positive impact tennis can have on a child. Both men connected to the 1965 Davis Cup, Turpin as the man who brought it to a public park, and Evans as the man who started talking about holding the 50th anniversary celebrations from the moment he unlocked the front door to the tennis center for the first time.
We're already talking to the city and to the USTA and some others about celebration we'll be holding at Samuel Grand in 2015 as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of that Davis Cup tie.
And both men know the magic that happens at Samuel Grand Tennis Center thanks to the community, the people who get involved.
Once we started, the community got behind us. I didn't have any money, but I had no difficulty in raising money to acquire rackets and balls, and because Dallas, is a very generous town.
That a young man was born 1,760 miles away, that one day would view this as the perfect place to plow unfurrowed ground and create an uncommon opportunity in a very common place.